introduce yourself to the jury?
Good afternoon. My name is Dr. Chris Cross.
What do you do for a living?
Right now, I host a nationally syndicated children's television show. It's mainly about caves and sort of everything to do with them, like the wildlife, history, how they're formed, stuff like that.
You introduce yourself as a doctor. What kind of doctor are you?
I have a PhD in meteorology. In other words, the study of weather.
How did you get your PhD?
I got my PhD by completing a program of study of meteorology at Penn Woods University. And after completing that program of study, I had to submit a thesis, which is an original work of research. And then I had to defend it in order to get my doctorate.
Were you successful in defending it?
Yes.
What other education have you received other than your PhD?
Before I got my PhD, I got a master's in geology, and I also studied earth sciences in college.
What other experiences did you have with caves?
So, in addition to what I learned in school, I was also a tour guide for Mammoth Caverns for about 2 years.
What did you do as a tour guide?
So as a tour guide, some of my main duties were guiding cavers into the cave system, telling them information about the cave, like the history, how it was formed, things like that. I also had to be trained in safety precautions to make sure no one got hurt on the trips. And I also would have to, help people work the equipment, things like that.
Who taught you the safety guides at that job?
My boss.
What are you here today for?
I was asked to give an opinion about the landslide that occurred at Cave of the Breezes on April 30th, 2017.
What information did you use to form that opinion?
So I looked at the depositions of Max Petunia, Chase Quinn, and Bobby Daly. And I also looked at some of Cave of the Breezes' policies and procedures. I looked at their waiver form. I looked at photos of the actual landslide. And I also looked at some scientific data about the circumstances surrounding the slide.
Was this enough for you to be able to form an opinion?
Yes.
I want to talk about landslides. What is a landslide?
A landslide is just a large-scale downward movement of soil and debris.
What is the cause of a landslide?
Gravity.
How does gravity affect a landslide?
So gravity tends to want to act on all things, and when soil becomes loosened up from the ground, gravity's will act upon the soil and cause it to fall downward. And if it's enough soil, it will cause a landslide.
Your Honor, may I approach the witness?
You may.
What is it that I just handed you?
So these are a couple photographs of the landslide covering the cave. Cave of the Breezes.
Your Honor, I move to admit what has been pre-marked Exhibit C2 and C1 as Trial Exhibit 2.
Any objection?
No objection.
All right, admitted as trial exhibit 2.
May I hand out copies to the jury?
You may.
Your Honor, plaintiff has blown up a demonstrative of what was Exhibit C2 for the witness to use to the jury. Can we have the witness step down and use this demonstrative?
May. Any objection?
No, Your Honor, just request that be able to
Okay.
see it.
Oh, thank you.
What is this photo of?
So this is an aerial view of Cave of the Breezes after the landslide happened. This circle right here indicates what was the entrance to the cave. You can see it's completely covered.
Is something like this landslide to this magnitude predictable?
Yes, it can be.
Okay. On the board, can you write cave warning signs and then defendant on the board? Okay. What are some warning signs that could predict a landslide?
There are three major warning signs. First is history of landslides in the past. Second, heavy precipitation, whether it be rain or snow. And third, changes in topography or the physical characteristics of the land.
So you mentioned history. Can you write history on the board?
Yep.
How does history as a warning sign of landslides?
History can be a warning sign because it can tell you that that particular land formation is at risk of being unstable and therefore more prone to landslides.
You also had mentioned heavy precipitation. Could you write rainfall on the board?
Yep.
How does heavy precipitation a warning sign of landslides?
It can be a significant warning sign because heavy rainfall contributes to slope instability, which is a direct cause of landslides.
What is slope instability?
So slope instability refers to how the soil on a slope, how structurally sound it is. So if there's a lot of loose soil on a slope, it's more likely that gravity will act upon it and make it more likely that a landslide is going to happen.
You also mentioned change in topography. Can you write topography on the board? How does changing the changes in topography affect a landslide?
It is a warning sign of a landslide because significant changes in the land would tell you that the earth is moving or gravity is acting upon the land.
What is examples of a change in topography that would affect a landslide?
So one big example would be trees. So sometimes when there's enough earth movement going on, the trees will actually get uprooted from the ground, and that's a big indicator that a landslide is likely to occur because the ground underneath the tree is actually pushing it out of the way.
Okay, I want to talk about this specific landslide. Was there any history of landslides previously?
Yes, so in my review of Bobby Daly's deposition and Max Petunia's, both of them mentioned that a landslide occurred at Cave of the Breezes 50 years ago or so.
Could you write 50 years on the board? Was there any sign of heavy rainfall at Cave of the Breeze?
Yes, in my review of Chase Quinn, Bobby Daly, and Max Petunia's deposition, they all say that the months right before the landslide, it had been very snowy and rainy.
Was there any independent evidence of the heavy rainfall?
Yes, so I also reviewed a report from NOAA, which is the National Oceanographic Atmospheric Administration, and that report showed that precipitation in the area in the months preceding the landslide was 190% above average.
Could you write 190% on the board?
Okay.
Was there any change in topography at Cave of the Breeze?
Yes. So when I reviewed Bobby Daly and Chase Quinn's deposition, they both mentioned fallen trees a couple times on a couple of occasions. Bobby Daly talks about how, walking around Cave of the Breezes, he had noticed a couple trees down right over the entrance over the winter. And even the day of the landslide, there had been a tree that had fallen down and it blocked the main road. So many of the employees were actually late on the day of the landslide.
Could you write fallen trees down on the board? Based on your education, training, and experience, have you formed an opinion to a degree of scientific certainty about whether this landslide was foreseeable?
Yes, I did.
What is your opinion in this case?
My opinion is that this landslide was foreseeable because these three risk factors were present.
You can retake this data. Your Honor, may I preserve the board for closing arguments?
You may.
Your Honor, may I retrieve the document from the witness and return to the clerks?
You may.
I want to talk about Cave of the Breeze precautions in this case. What precautions did Cave of the Breeze take in order for a landslide?
In my opinion, they did not take any precautions.
What precautions should they have taken?
In my professional opinion, there are two major things that they could have done. One, they could have closed down temporarily and made sure that the cave was safe once they noticed that these risk factors were present. And then second, they could have provided extra supplies in the cave, specifically non-perishable food.
You mentioned that they shouldn't have been open. Why should they have not been open?
They shouldn't have been open because of the excessive rainfall that happened in the area right around Cave of the Breezes, and because the downed trees should have been a big sign that there was earth movement going on and that the cave might be unstable and unsafe to go in.
Objection, Your Honor. We move to strike the previous statement by this witness. We've heard no testimony about this witness's ability to determine whether or not a cave system should be open or closed on a particular day.
Counselor?
Assuming we're outside the presence of the jury, we've heard that this witness worked in another cave as a tour guide, and during her time as that tour guide, she learned about safety procedures and what safety procedures are appropriate for a cave. And one of those safety procedures were when to keep the business open and closed.
Okay, anything else?
Your Honor, may be heard. I don't believe the scope of the witness's testimony spoke to when the determination should be made of when a cave should be open or closed. Considering that they have not been laid as of yet, I don't think this witness, at least from an expert opinion, is allowed to testify.
Well, she testified that she's familiar with the standards of safety in the industry. And so if she testifies now that they breached that standard by staying open, then I'll allow her to testify to that effect. Overruled.
What should have Cave of Breeze done instead of being opened?
They should have closed down at least long enough to get a surveyor out there and make sure that the cave was structurally sound.
When you say a surveyor, what is a survey?
A surveyor is somebody that takes measurements of any type of land formation, but in this case, they would have taken measurements of the cave, examined the walls, and made sure they weren't likely to cave in.
When was Cave of the Breeze's last land survey?
From my review of the record, it occurred sometime in 2016.
What happened after the land survey in 2016?
I'm sorry, what happened after?
What happened after the land survey in 2016?
So based on my review of the record, after the 2016 survey, Bobby Daly decided to change the frequency of the survey to every 3 years instead of every year.
What were the weather conditions like after 2016?
Well, the year at the end of 2016 and the beginning of 2017, it had been a very snowy winter and a rainy spring.
Based on your review of the record, did Cave of the Breeze have a land survey in 2017?
No.
You also mentioned before that they needed to have emergency supplies. What kind of emergency supplies were you talking about?
I was mainly talking about non-perishable food, something that in the event of a cave-in, somebody would be able to survive on.
How much non-perishable food did Cave of the Breeze have in the cave at the time of the landslide?
They didn't supply any food or supplies inside the cave.
What food or water did the hockey team have in the cave?
From my review of the record, they only brought some light snacks and maybe some water bottles.
Why is having emergency food supplies in the cave so important?
Having these supplies is important because if Cave of the Breezes did have these supplies, they wouldn't have been making decisions in a panic, realizing that, this entire hockey team is trapped in a cave with absolutely no food or water. And if they had these supplies, then they would have at least not been in such a time crunch to get these people out, because they would be able to know that they could survive in the cave for longer, so they can come up with a more well thought out plan, a more well thought out plan, and one that is normally used in this type of situation. They wouldn't have to go to such extreme measures as they did.
You mentioned extreme measures. What was the extreme measures that Cave of the Breeze used?
So, because they were so panicked and strapped for time, they were approached by Howard Sent, who as far as I know, they didn't even know who he was before he showed up. And they were sort of forced to use a completely experimental robot that they didn't even know how it worked or anything like that, in the hopes that this robot would be able to get them out, because they had no other way of getting them out alive.
Based on your education training experience, have you formed an opinion to a reasonable degree of professional certainty?
Yes.
What is that opinion?
My opinion is that Cave of the Breezes did not prepare properly for this cave-in. And what they should have done, what they neglected to do in this case, is they did not provide any extra supplies such as food and water in the cave in the event of a cave-in. And they also failed to shut down and do a survey to make sure that the cave was actually safe to be in.
No more questions, Your Honor.
Right? Leo,
Hello.
what do you want?
Landslide is influence of gravity acting on weakened material to make up a sloping area of land, correct?
I'm sorry?
So a landslide is influenced by gravity acting on weakened material?
That is a very childlike way of explaining it. Yes, that's true.
The most destructive landslides occur after a triggering event like heavy rainfall.
You'll have to say that again.
The most destructive landslides happen after a triggering event like heavy rainfall.
Well, landslides can have occurred for any number of reasons. I mean, some of the most destructive landslides ever have usually occurred after a triggering event like an earthquake, not necessarily rainfall.
Back to my question, is the most destructive landslides happen after a triggering event such as heavy rainfall or an earthquake, but heavy rain too.
Well, heavy rain can cause a destructive landslide. Typically, when you refer to a destructive landslide, though, you're referring to the damage to property. Like if a house was on the slope of a ledge, and then you have a landslide, it could damage the foundation of the house. That I would quibble.
So my question, that's a yes.
Well, I'm trying to answer your question. Your question deals with this. I'm assuming presumes a link to this landslide, but this was not a landslide. This was a debris avalanche.
And Cave of the Breeze had a landslide before the one in April 2017.
You'll have to be more specific.
50 years ago, Cave of the Breeze had a landslide.
There is anecdotal evidence that a landslide had occurred at that location, but the size and magnitude of that landslide and the triggering event of the landslide is unknown.
So that's a yes to my question?
I'm sorry?
That's a yes to my question?
You'd have to repeat your question.
There was a landslide 50 years ago at Cave of the Breeze. Simple yes or no answer.
I don't know if it was called Cave of the Breeze at the time, but at that location, yes.
And based on your review of the record, Bobby Daly knew about this previous landslide.
He had been given anecdotal discussion of there being a prior landslide on the location. But again, the details of it were not provided.
And heavy water latent slope materials succumb to gravity easier, correct?
I think you're referring to the fact that if water infiltrates the soil, that it makes it more likely for there to be a landslide?
Yes.
That is accurate.
So excessive water would be a common trigger for landslides.
For landslides, but not for a debris avalanche.
For landslides, yes.
That's right.
and you reviewed the record in this case, and you read that Bobby Daly said it was a rainy spring.
There was above average rainfall in that spring, yes.
And there was a lot of snow in the wintertime.
The snow levels were anecdotal. I don't know the exact snow levels.
Your Honor, may I approach the witness who has been pre-marked as Exhibit E?
Okay.
Okay, this is a map of the United States from NOAA about the regional precipitation ranks.
This is the regional precipitation ranks for February to April 2017. So it does not discuss the winter.
But this is the precipitation ranks, correct?
Yes, comparison with the time period of 1895 to 2017.
Your Honor, the plaintiff moves to put this in as trial exhibit 4. We have stipulated that the exhibit is authentic.
Any objection?
I guess no objection.
Okay. Entered as trial exhibit 4.
So the X is the Cave of the Breeze, correct?
That is the location in which you would find the Cave of the Breeze.
And that is in the... Oh, can I publish copies to the jury?
You may.
So the X is in the blue area on the map, correct?
It is in the light blue area, yes.
And the light blue area is above average, correct? On
So-
the legend on the bottom?
It was calculated in May of 2017 to have been recorded as above average rainfall for that time period.
Thank you. May I retrieve the document?
You may.
And NOAA said that prior to 60 days prior to April 2017, the rainfall was 190% above average.
I'm not sure where you're getting that information from.
From NOAA?
Well, I'm not sure what report you're referring to.
Your Honor, may I read stipulation? Stipulation 5 into the record.
Okay?
The area immediately surrounding the Cave of the Breeze has an excess rainfall during a 60-day prior to April 30th, 2017. The rainfall estimated by the National Oceanic and Astronomic Administration, the NOAA, had to have exceeded 190% of normal historical record rainfall for the area. Bobby Daly, in his deposition, said that he had saw some fallen trees at the entrance of the cave.
When?
The winter before the landslide.
Yes, that is correct. Bobby Daly did say that.
And he also saw that on the day of the landslide that a tree had fallen down on the main road.
I don't remember if it was Bobby Daly that said that or Chase Quinn, but someone from the defendant's employ did say that.
And deforestations and changes is a cause of landslides.
I don't know why you mentioned landslide. We didn't have a landslide on April 30th, 2017.
A debris avalanche is a type of landslide, correct?
No, a debris avalanche is an entirely different phenomena than a typical landslide.
They're mud falling down on top of the mountain, down to the bottom of the mountain.
That is why geologists need 8, 12 years of schooling because of oversimplifications like that.
Destruction of vegetation is a cause of landslides. Not talking about avalanches, I'm talking about landslides.
Okay, so as a general teaching, yes, deforestation can cause minor landslides.
And deforestation, destruction of vegetation is also like trees falling down.
Yes, trees are a form of vegetation.
And trees falling down would be destruction of those vegetation, right?
That is correct.
Now I want to talk about the preparation that Cave of the Breeze had. So they had an inspection in 2016. A land survey in 2016.
Yes, Cave of the Breezes did perform a land survey in 2016.
And in 2017, from February to April, it was above average rainfall.
Reported by the...
No.
Yes, that's correct.
But in 2017, Cave of the Breeze didn't have a land survey done again.
I did not review anywhere in the record that they had another survey performed in 2017.
Bobby Daly saw trees falling down in the winter before the landslide.
That's right.
And 2017 still didn't have a land survey.
I think I already answered that question.
So the answer would be no, they didn't.
Well, I'd like to maintain the answers that I've already provided and not repeat them.
And in your review of the record, there was no food provided by Cave of the Breeze in the cave on the day of the landslide.
Well, each of the teammates, I believe, did have food.
But Cave of the Breeze didn't provide extra food in the cave.
Well, that food that they would have had in their emergency pack was unfortunately not with Miss Cooney before the landslide occurred.
So before the landslide occurred, they didn't have any extra food, and they didn't have the emergency pack.
That's right. The emergency pack, I believe, did contain food within it.
1 to 2 days of extra food?
I believe so, yes.
But that emergency pack wasn't in the cave.
No, Miss Cooney was retrieving it from my review of the record at the time that the landslide occurred.
And you mentioned earlier that the team brought some food.
That's my understanding, yes.
But not a lot of food.
Well, I mean, they had enough to last 3 days without any indication of starvation or anything like that. So they appeared to have some amount of rations.
And to remove all the mud from the cave, it took 37 days.
To completely clear the entire debris avalanche from the entrance to restore it to its original condition, I believe took 37 days.
And Cave of the Breeze and Bobby Daly had to rush to make a plan to get the hockey team out of the cave.
Well, they had to act expeditiously, yes.
They had to act expeditiously because of the lack of food in the cave.
They had to act expeditiously because there were people inside the cave that they'd like to get out.
Because they could starve.
Well, any number of things could happen while you're in there. They could have tried to go deeper into the cave, which they didn't because they were given the proper
They didn't
warnings.
have enough food to stay in there for 37 days.
I think that it's a false premise to assume that they'd have to stay in there for 37 days.
No more questions. Bobby Daly, on the witness stand here today, testified that they had to act quickly because the team didn't have enough food. They didn't have enough food because Bobby Daly didn't put enough food in the cave. If he did put enough food in the cave, Max Petunia wouldn't be hurt today because they wouldn't have had to use the Howard stent machine. My partner asked you to remember 2 points here today. 1, that the landslide was foreseeable, and 2, that the actions of Bobby Daly and Cove Breeze did not properly use precautions against the landslide. To our point number 1, that landslides were foreseeable. Dr. Crisscross got on the stand and she explained to you about landslides. And she explained that a landslide is when the ground loses its density and gravity causes all the mud and dirt to fall down the hill. And she said that there are 3 triggers and warning signs of this avalanche. She said 1 was history. She explained that if history of the land had previously had a landslide, it would be reasonable to believe that a landslide could happen again in the future. Cave of the Breezes had a landslide 50 years ago at the exact same location, and Bobby Daly knew about that landslide. She also told you that heavy rainfall was another warning sign of a landslide. She explained that the heavy rainfall causes the ground to be loose and more likely to roll down the mountain. And she said excessive rainfall makes it even worse. Cave of the Breeze had excessive rainfall in February to April of that time before the landslide. NOAA, a national organization, showed that there was an above average rainfall for between February and April of 2017. 190% above average rainfall during this time, the 60 days prior to April. Bobby Daly got on the stand and told you that he saw how rainy the spring was and how much snow they got in the wintertime. Max Petunia told you that the day before the landslide that there was rain, heavy rain, on April 29, 2017. Dr. Cross also explained that change in topography could be a warning sign of a landslide. That the change in the land could cause the ground to lose its anchors. And if they lose their anchors, they would have the wet soil wouldn't connect to the dry soil underneath. And these anchors would be the tree roots. So fallen trees would be a major sign of a landslide. Bobby Daly saw fallen trees at the entrance of the cave the winter prior to the landslide. Multiple trees had fallen at the entrance of the cave. And the day of the landslide, a tree had fallen down on the main road. 2 different instances of fallen trees that Bobby Daly knew. This landslide was foreseeable, and Bobby Daly knew about it. He knew about the history. He knew about the heavy rainfall, and he knew about the fallen trees. And he did nothing. Which leads me to my second point, that Bobby Daly and Cave of the Breeze did not properly take precautions for this landslide. They didn't take proper precautions in 2 ways. 1, the lack of food, emergency food supplies in the cave, and 2, them not closing down until they were properly advised on the safety precautions. With emergency food, Bobby Daly told you today that he did not have any emergency food in the cave. Dr. Crisscross said that emergency food is important to having in a cave because It would allow the rescue team to take longer to figure out a well-organized and safe plan to remove the hockey team. And because that Cave of the Breeze didn't have an emergency food supply, they had to go to extreme measures to save the hockey team. So the hockey team didn't die. And that extreme measure was Howard Stent's machine. Howard Stent's machine, which injured Max Petunia. Another way that Bobby Daly didn't take proper precaution was keeping the business open. Bobby Daly saw all these warning signs in 2017. He saw the above average rainfall. He saw the trees falling down in the winter of 2016 and the 190% above rainfall in the 60 days prior to the rain. And after seeing all of this rain and all of this fallen trees, he still didn't get another land survey. The only land survey he had was in 2016. 2016, before all this rain and before all the fallen trees. What he should have done was, once he saw all these warning signs that he saw, he should have closed down the business and got another land survey to make sure that the property was safe. The cave was safe for people to go in. But he didn't. And because he didn't, Max Petunia was in the cave. The plaintiff has a burden of preponderance of the evidence, which just means the scale has to slightly tip in the plaintiff's favor. You have to believe the story that Bobby Daly didn't take the precautions needed to keep Max Petunia safe in that cave, just by 51%. That means that, like in life, there are some gray areas. Some facts in this case will go towards the defendant's side, like that the United States Geological Service didn't give a warning that there was a landslide. The United States Geological Service wasn't at the cave on the day of the landslide. They didn't see the fallen trees around the cave. They didn't see the excessive amount of rain. Bobby Daly did. Airplanes. When you take an airplane, you trust that the airplane won't go up if there's a thunderstorm, if it's raining outside, extreme weather. You trust that the airplane company is going to stay grounded until they get an all clear from an expert telling them that they can fly again. Bobby Daly didn't get an expert to tell him it was all clear to go. He let them go off and go into the cave when he should have kept them grounded. Therefore, we ask that you find Bobby Daly liable. Thank you.
All right.